Welcome to Taking the High Road, a special show dedicated to the trucking industry, specifically at the confluence of recruiting, retention, and compliance. In the fourth year as the host of this show, I bring over 2 decades of industry experience, both on the carrier side as well as the vendor side. Each week, I interview industry experts and thought leaders who bring their insight to the driver lifecycle as we discuss the industry's greatest challenges. I always appreciate your feedback, good or bad. Don't forget to leave a rating and a review. I'd also like to thank and highlight the show's valuable sponsors. Their dedication and commitment to the industry and to the show is greatly appreciated. If you're interested in being a sponsor of the show or joining me for an interview, please email Jeremy at takingthehigherroad.com. This week, I'm honored to be joined by 2 experienced industry leaders who have teamed up to provide a unique service to our nation's underserved drivers when it comes to career coaching and advice. Joe Anderson, Director of Recruiting, and Caleb Yee, Senior Driver Hiring Manager, both with Nussbaum Transportation and both co-founders of Truck Drivers Best. Thank you both so much for joining me.
Jeremy, it's good to be here. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Yeah, I'd love to get into your respective backgrounds and kind of hear about your roles at Nussbaum and also hear what it was that inspired you to launch Truck Drivers Best. I want to be sure you can share with the audience what Truck Drivers Best is all about and how it's progressing. And perhaps we can touch on the many challenges that drivers face when considering a new job and how you're able to assist them with that conversation. And then lastly, I'll introduce a new segment to the show called Industry Health, and we'll touch on a driver health related topic. Does all that work for you?
Sounds great.
Awesome. All right. Well, as you probably know, I normally start with a book recommendation. I'd love to hear, if both of you have one, that'd be fantastic. Is there a particular book that you could recommend that's been impactful to you?
Sure. Yeah. So a really good one that came to mind for me, it's kind of roller coaster rides. I'll read, book after book after book, and then I go a few months and don't read any. But one for me that I thought was really great was Start With Why by Simon Sinek. And basically it just kind of outlines, there's so many people trying to do things or worried about what they're doing or, what they're going to offer, and instead start with why you're doing what you're doing. And then if you can get into the how and what behind that and it matches the why, well, now you can have some authenticity behind what you're doing as well. And so, that's really one that stood out for me.
That's an excellent book. And thank you for saying that. I read that several years ago and felt like it's one of those, it shows up on this show every once in a while, and it's so foundational. So excellent choice. Joe, what do you think?
For me, I'd probably go with The Ideal Team Player by Patrick Lencioni. Just a very easy read. I really like his style. It makes it very entertaining, and yet there's always a good message. And I think it's pretty applicable for anybody that works with people, because what he does is he kind of shows that an ideal team player, somebody that you want to work with, is going to be, I think he says, humble, hungry, and smart. Those are the 3 qualities they're going to have. Smart being like people smarts, kind of that emotional intelligence. So if you work with people, it's kind of helpful, gives you some language around like why someone might be the way they are and what area they might be lacking. And then if you're hiring people, same thing, kind of helps you. Okay, is this person strong in all 3 areas? Are they coachable? Maybe they're great on paper, but they're coming off a little bit arrogant in person, whatever. It just gives you, it's common sense stuff, but it gives you that language to articulate it and really helps you realize like this is what makes a person a great teammate. So I really enjoyed that one and any of his books that I read.
Yeah, that's the only one or one of the few that I haven't read. I've not heard of it. So I wrote that down and I'll add that to my Goodreads list. It sort of reminds me of a quote from Warren Buffett. And it's talking about when you hire people, you want to hire people who are smart and people who are driven, but above all, integrity. Because without that, those other 2 things will destroy you. People who don't have the integrity, but they're really smart, they're wily, or they're really driven. That's dangerous. So kind of similar quote. If we could, let's take a minute and share with the audience sort of your journey into trucking and how long each of you have been with Nussbaum. Let's start with you, Joe.
Sure. So I came to Nussbaum actually right out of high school. So it's been, this July was 12 years ago. So Nussbaum is my only professional experience and then my only trucking experience as well within that. and started in the accounting department, actually, of all things, and was there for about 2.5 years before I got asked to move to HR. Nussbaum was probably around 250 drivers at that point, roughly less than half what we are today. And we were trying to grow. We had 2 recruiters. They wanted a third one. I don't want to think that had anything to do with like my lack of accounting skills, but that might have been part of it. But anyway, rest is history. It's been basically 10 years now. I've been in HR and recruiting. And yeah, that's where all of the experience for what we're trying to do with Truck Drivers Best comes from for me.
Yeah, awesome. Caleb?
Yeah, so I came to Nussbaum in 2015, so almost 10 years ago, and took about a year and a half kind of hiatus in the middle there. 2 of those years were spent as a driver manager, so really got kind of started on the driver side, working with them and the everyday nuts and bolts of things. And then in 2017, moved over into recruiting. And yeah, I've been there ever since. So working with Joe.
Nice. Well, you both, full disclosure for the audience, you've been a customer of DriverReach, is the company that I founded for years. And so I've known you for years, and I know that you've both seen firsthand just the many driver struggles and drivers who just pay the price for making poor decisions. I know that you're both very thoughtful, very empathetic people, and you decided to be an even greater champion for drivers. So you co-founded Truck Drivers Best. That's what I really want to dive into. Can you share with the audience what Truck Drivers Best is all about?
Sure. Yeah. So the name Truck Drivers Best is supposed to help convey that we've got a driver's best interest at heart, right? And so we want them to find the best carrier and have, be the best version of themselves, ultimately have the best overall career. We feel like from what we've seen, on this side of the wheel, if you can call it that, we know that trucking presents an incredible opportunity for drivers. There's not many careers out there, and we talk about this in our book a little bit, we'll get to later. There's not that many careers out there that you can be, 21 years old or even 18 now, in certain cases, go out, get a CDL for relatively cheap compared to college tuition, and start making, maybe be making 6 figures within a few years of hard work. I mean, that's incredible. There's a huge sacrifice, though, that you make to do that when you're an over-the-road truck driver, and that's being gone all the time. So it's hard from our perspective to see drivers being willing to make that sacrifice, be away from their families, be out on, dealing with all the conditions that come with being over the road, and then not capitalizing on the return on that opportunity. Too many drivers, you mentioned, make these rash decisions one after another, and ultimately leads to years and years of squandered time where they don't end up with a successful career. They're still living paycheck to paycheck. That should not be so in this industry. And so Truck Drivers Best is us really trying to empower the driver with information and knowledge, on the front end, how to find the right trucking company for them, how to just present themselves in hiring conversations, even when they're with employers, with carriers, how to make smart, well thought out decisions, at that time frame too. Maybe they're considering leaving one trucking company to go to another. Have you really thought about all the angles? We've seen too many decisions get made quickly that come back to burn them later. And so that ultimately we're trying to help drivers make successful careers. And then the other side of that we think will come from that is just lowering industry turnover. Anyone that works on this side of things, most of your listeners are going to be well aware of turnover and how high it is. It's high every year. It's too high. So we feel like empowering the drivers is kind of the unturned stone in fixing driver turnover. Drivers being more aware, trying to think of the best way to say it, just more empowered on how to navigate this career is going to fix that, in our opinion.
Yeah, I love the empowerment concept in general. I mean, basically what you're saying is, look, I get it. Like, you might have this opportunity to make a couple cents more per mile. Let's take a step back. Let's look at a 10,000 foot view here, and let's look at that company. Let's look at the miles that you're talking about anyway. And there's so many factors, the company culture and all of that. And so empowering them to make that decision, not in a vacuum, but actually as a sort of almost an agent or as a friend, as an advisor for them, I think is great. What was the catalyst? How did that, what was it that inspired you to launch Truck Drivers Best?
Yeah. So the catalyst for all of this was all of the things just mentioned, right? Seeing that day in and day out. Just a few months ago, we had a guy with our experience at Nussbaum, that he wanted to leave his family. They were going to start their own trucking company, owner operators. And like you said, from that 10,000 foot view, like, do you really know what's going on in the freight market right now? Like, do you really think this? No, I know. It's, yeah, but we've really thought it through. And not a month after going there, the guy calls back. He wants to come back. We never hauled a load. Yeah, we thought about it for 6 months, but we never actually thought about how do we haul a load? Or even those phone calls, right? You pick up the phone and here's somebody interested in driving with you, and the first question out of their mouth is, "What's your CPM?" Who cares, right? Like, if I have you go drive 500 miles this week and pay you, $2 a mile, you're still not making any money. So just all of these things going, okay, seen throughout the industry, there's typically groups out there that want to help companies and coach them and educate them. And some of those things are helpful, but whether or not the company continues to do them is another, choice on their end. Whereas we kind of looked at this the catalyst being, okay, if we can approach drivers and educate them either out of school, or maybe a guy that has driven for 20 years, but he's sick and tired of hopping and having 30 jobs, that now he's open to some of this education, that now you could force some change in the industry when one of those guys, if he's equipped with what questions to ask and what research to do when talking to companies, some of that would force some change on the company side too, because they would have to have answers to these questions and things of that nature.
Well, you said, the question, what's your cents per mile, kind of the first question that comes out, which is, I think, probably pretty common, but I would expect that's better than the question, do you press charges? Does your company press charges? Now, joking, obviously. I think part of the advantage of doing what you're doing is, A, I don't know that it's being done. And so I think it's novel. And we've had this conversation before. But also, I don't think that it could come from two better people, two good human beings, two humble people who genuinely care. And so I say that because I know you, directly. Now, if you could share who's the primary target for Truck Drivers Best today, and how does the solution benefit the entire industry, not just drivers?
Sure. Yeah. So the primary target today is drivers, and looking at that from a standpoint of, okay, how do we educate them, and how do we make some change in the industry, lowering turnover if we can educate enough of them? Obviously, that's going to be hard with the number of drivers that are out there. However, with that being said, I get kind of tying that back into the last thing. Yeah, if you can change the mindset here of, okay, here's a guy, let's take somebody out of school, for example. They just got their CDL. Some uncle that they see, once every 5 years told them, hey, get your CDL. It's going to be great. And that's it. Now they got their CDL. All they did was get a slip of paper that says they can drive a truck now. We get calls from these guys all the time where they've been driving for a year and they ended up at 3 places that really weren't what they wanted. It really wasn't what they were looking for, but they didn't know any better. And so just as far as helping the industry as well, now you have, if you can educate that guy right out of school on what he's looking for, well, not only is that going to help him avoid going to your company if it's not the right fit, but also if you're looking for good drivers, now you have guys with a better safety record. You have guys with a better work history that are educated on, hey, how do I really find out if you're a good fit for me?
Yeah, really, we're just trying to give them somebody in their corner. And like you guys mentioned, there's so much available to the company side of things. Like we've all ran into each other down at the recruiting and retention conference every year. A great place to go to learn, to network, on the recruiter, whatever side of the office. But like drivers, we just feel like have kind of been left to dry. And so we're trying to be that person in their corner that they can, access and get some help.
Well, and you mentioned it's one thing for the driver, but it's the industry as a whole. You mentioned turnover, that being an area that can be dramatically improved, and probably some either exposing some bad carrier practices or certainly some accountability. I think you touched on, but also an opportunity. It sounds like there could be a next step that might lead to even more, education on the recruiting side. and we could touch on that, but you mentioned a book. So this may be an opportunity to talk about that. I know that you authored an ebook that I think is an extremely valuable resource for drivers. Can you talk about the book and share the best ways our listeners can access it and perhaps share it with drivers that they engage with?
Yeah, appreciate that. So that was kind of the starting point. Like when Caleb a few years back really started, Caleb, kind of our wonder, dreamer, inventor, started thinking like, wow, the drivers are kind of this unhelped side of the industry, of the players in the industry. This is like the untouched. What could we do? It's like, well, could write, a resource. It could be a book that they could just access and kind of like, I don't know, whatever self-help book or how to plumb or whatever, if I just want to learn something. So that was the initial thought. And so, yeah, that was like our product that we put together as this book. We call it Take Control of Your Driving Career. And you can access that on our website, which is just truckdriversbest.com. Pretty straightforward. And you can go on there and buy that book. And it's a short read. It's maybe, if you read it all in one go, you'd probably knock it out in like a half hour. So it's definitely nothing. Well, I think we even mentioned in the book, like you can knock this out on a 10-hour break, still get some sleep, all that good stuff. Right now it is just available in, ebook format. So we would like to get it into an audio format. That's something we have not done yet, but we realize, half a good portion of our audience is driving down the road every day. So we would like to do that. But that's the starting point. We try to lay out everything within the book that we feel like, like Caleb said, whether it's a CDL grad or someone that hasn't even graduated CDL school yet, or the guy that's been doing it for 20 years and is just sick and tired of we call it like the vicious cycle of just job to job, hopefully lays out overall what they need to kind of take some steps from there. But we mentioned in that book, if you want more, if you want just more free information, we've got a YouTube channel, Truck Drivers Best. You can go on there. We post videos of just, whether it's just taking one quick topic and doing a 40-second short on like, hey, we just had this happen, like look out for this, whatever it is. But then if they want really intentional coaching, they can actually take it a step further and book a phone call with us where, whether it's a half hour or an hour, we basically just designate that time to what can we do to help you. Do you want to tell us about your situation, give us the whole rundown, and we can offer advice? Do you want us to spend time researching companies in your area, seeing who might be a fit for you? Do you want advice on how to approach your next conversation? Like, hey, you just got turned down from a job. Tell us how that went. We can maybe give you some clarity on why they might have turned you down. Anything they want, basically, that's their hour with us. And I think I'd be willing to say, like, within that hour, we come up with a few action items like, hey, yeah, I'll dig into this and I'll shoot you an email with my thoughts later. We kind of get back to them and maybe keep that communication up. So that's the more, if they really want to get more into the weeds. But the book is just a simple, click and read and hopefully give them some helpful instructions.
Yeah, I think the content is great. I read it. And by the way, if you are thinking about doing an audible version of it, I'd raise my hand as a potential reader for you, if
okay.
unless one of you want to do it, or maybe someone like Gilbert Godfrey or some awful voice that you're like,
You'd be.
No, we were hoping for Morgan Freeman, but
or what's Frank Caliendo as Morgan Freeman? If you've seen that, that's so funny. Well, what I was going to say is, obviously our listeners are primarily on the recruiting side, of carriers, not as many drivers. But that being said, I think it's so valuable of a service that you're offering these drivers. I would encourage those listening to consider sharing, access to Truck Drivers Best, maybe recommending, reading that book. I think it's just helpful. But, one elephant potentially in the room, is like, what do you say to recruiters who might be hesitant to promote Truck Drivers Best, just out of fear that, you try to recruit those drivers to Nussbaum?
Yeah, I appreciate, the elephant in the room. And that's, I would say, I don't know if we mentioned this earlier, just in general, probably want to start by saying this, Truck Drivers Best is not affiliated with Nussbaum at all. Obviously, it's not a secret or anything like that. We work at Nussbaum. We love Nussbaum. That's where all of our experience comes from, but it's not a part of Nussbaum at all. So I guess I think there's very few situations where it could actually negatively impact someone in recruiting or for another company. And I'll kind of walk through those. The only situation I think that could be is if they're talking to one of their current drivers who is maybe on the fence about whether they're going to stick with them or not. They're kind of waffling. Maybe it's because they've had issues and there's been discipline conversations, and you as the carrier, you really want to keep this driver. You've put a lot of work into him, but you kind of want him to hear a third party advice. That's maybe an awkward, like, well, do I send it to them? What if he's in Nussbaum's hiring area? That's about the only situation. And that's where I'd say, got to take our word for it at this point. We are not motivated to hire that person. That is not our goal. Our goal is to help drivers in the 48 states. Nussbaum only hires in a select part of the country to begin with. And even within those regions, we're often capped. We're often full. We don't even have the truck availability, so we can't hire anyway. So I envision there being very few situations where we actually could negatively impact the company. All the situations where we could positively impact the driver and indirectly the company, I would say, is like, if you're, say, that driver that I just referenced, say he's already committed to leaving, right? He's already said, nope, I'm done. Here's my 2-week notice. Or maybe it's his last day. To the carrier's perspective, that driver's already gone. Whether they just feel like the driver is not thinking things through very well, or they just want to help him out. Hey, mention these guys over here could maybe give you some insight in the, kind of just down the road, what you could do differently. They're already gone anyway. Maybe we even talk that driver into staying. Have you really thought what you're doing here? This company, one of those things that drivers do often, unfortunately, from our perspective, is forget the good things the company has done for, say, 4 or 5 years, and they focus on the last few weeks or months that have just been a little bit rougher for whatever reason. So maybe even in that situation, we can be that unbiased third party that says, hey, let's not forget what the good things are. Have you really thought this through? But then otherwise, if they're considering hiring a driver and they want to hire the driver and the driver wants to be hired by them, well, great. There's no need to even recommend us. We're not needed, right? But if they turn that driver down, then that's an opportunity to kind of let them down easy and say, hey, for whatever reason, we're not able to hire you. But I do think you could maybe stand to benefit talking with these guys. They might be able to give you some direction for what to do next. You're already not hiring that driver anyway. So I really feel like, it's a very fair question. And, I'm not saying there wouldn't be situations where a driver comes across our path where they are in our hiring area and we do feel like, hey, maybe they're brand new to the industry. They're not even with an employer. Of course, we're not going to purposely pass up an opportunity to hire someone, but that's not going to be a motivation when they're working for another employer to try to take them. We're trying to solve turnover, not increase it in that case, right? So,
and with that too, maybe you're a company that you don't have a training program, so you've got guys that just got their CDL. Well, great, hey, here's the ebook, or here's where you can get it to help you out for finding a good company, or and right, there's 500,000 trucking companies in the United States, so odds are they're going to land at one of the ones that aren't Nussbaum. And in some of these cases too, like Joe said, if it's a great guy, he's been driving for 10 years, he's had 2 jobs in there. Obviously that guy knows what he's doing and you don't need help hiring him. So great, we're not involved. So some of these people too could very well just be conversations where they might not be somebody Nussbaum's really looking for either. I've had plenty of conversations here where the guy has issues on his application. He has issues safety-wise, all these other things, and kind of coaching them through, hey, here's really what you need to do to make your application look better. That way a year from now, you can get on at a good company that you want to go to. And those guys, great, send them our way because, hopefully we can help that person.
Mm-hmm. I think one quick thing, because Caleb and I have both been on this side of things with Nussbaum, where we're trying to reason with the driver, like, hey, don't forget about all the good that's been, are you really thinking this through? Or Caleb's example of the guy that was going to go drive with his family, like, hey, we're in, the longest downturn of freight rates that anyone can remember. Is this really the time? It doesn't mean as much when it's coming from your current employer. Because there, as a driver, you're just going to think, well, yeah, in the back of your mind, obviously they want me to stay. I'm making money for them, of course. So I do think some of the value of us comes in that we are an unbiased third party. And so hopefully a driver will respect that more. So there might be some value there for a carrier to recommend us. That's not the angle we thought of when coming up with this, but just thinking through that now, it's like there could be something there.
And to tag on with that too, that's part of the reason we've had a couple people ask us, like at Nussbaum, oh, well, why didn't you try and do this through Nussbaum? And Joe had brought it up earlier this morning that we really thought that we would lose credibility with drivers if this was tied to a trucking company. Hey, we're a trucking company that hires drivers. Let us help you find a job and give you advice, right? And so that's why we thought, hey, we need to make this separate so it can be something different, a third party to step in and say, here's help.
And I think you're spot on. I think that's the right approach. And I think you've made a lot of really good points of why listeners here would want to direct people to you. It's not a threat at that point. If anything, you're probably going to be able to help, to maybe in some cases talk some sense. No pun intended. But now you're primarily focused on the CDL driver with Truck Drivers Best today. Is there a plan, or have you thought through an opportunity to provide a product or service to other industry stakeholders like the recruiters that are listening?
Yeah, definitely. So there's been over the years, like we've talked about earlier, just different people that have kind of come and gone on education for recruiters or for companies. And right now, I don't know that there's a huge big name in the industry doing that. And again, we wanted to kind of approach it from the driver's side first on, okay, how do we help the drivers? But we do feel that, here in the future, there could be an opportunity to still help drivers by educating on the company side as well. And so we've kind of been throwing around, what does that look like? Does that look like a course for recruiters? Does that look like a site visit to see, hey, what are your practices? Why is your turnover at 85%? Here's 5 things that would drop that by 15 points right off the bat. So yes, we're trying to throw that around currently to go, okay, how do we stay authentic with drivers? But also, how can we help on the driver's side by helping on the company side? And what's the best avenue to do that?
And I don't mean this to sound wrong, but that would be the easy side of it, right? I mean, drivers, it's kind of hard to get credibility because we're not drivers. And that's one thing that we kind of fight with this is like, why should someone want advice from us when they've never done what I've done? They don't have a clue what life over the road is like. And that's 100% on. And we don't try to lead anyone on and think that we do know that. Our point is that like you're trying to get hired by companies and be successful at all the non-driving things that come into play with driving. That might be something that drivers don't realize is just how much there is tied into success that has nothing to do with physical driving or life over the road. So we think we're uniquely, set up to give them that information. But at a glance on paper, it's like, why would I take advice from these guys? They've worked in the office for 10 years. So on the recruiter company level, that wouldn't be an issue. We've literally done this, what we'd be teaching on. So that would be easy in that regard. We started with drivers because we felt like that's where the real need is. And we mentioned in the book, there are a lot of great companies out there that are doing well and ones that want to do well or do better and learn how. But there's also companies that have practices that are not great, and that's how they thrive in some ways. So like part of it's like, man, this side of the industry has all the opportunities for help, and half of them maybe don't even want it. Drivers need a lot of help and don't really have a way to get it. So that was kind of our goal. And yet, like Caleb said, I mean, yeah, we definitely could easily see transitioning or including, the other side of it.
Yeah. Well, either way, I look forward to seeing everything unfold. And before we go, I want to transition to a new featured segment of the show called Industry Health. Today's Industry Health segment is brought to you by Project 61. The question is, how can a carrier better promote driver health to ensure they live longer than the current 61-year life expectancy of a CDL driver? What do you think?
It's a great question. Go ahead.
Yeah, it is. Well, I think Joe, and you can tell me if I'm wrong here, but in our conversation with Jeremy a few weeks ago, Jeremy had brought up Project 61. That was the first time that I had heard that the life expectancy of a CDL holder is that low. So I think Joe and I were both kind of shocked by that. Of like, wow. It makes sense, right? Because of the things they eat and sitting all day and things like that. Now, one thing from our experience, at Nussbaum is just, again, on the education side. So especially these guys, you get them in from CDL school or things like that. You can have trainers that teach them how to grocery shop, teach them how to meal plan, teach them how to make time to go for a walk on their 10-hour break. So education's important, but then also on the company side, there's multiple things that drivers can be incentivized by. And just for example, at Nussbaum, a couple of things here they've done really well is we've got a couple of programs, Move It and Lose It, where drivers can use a step tracker, they can use a digital scale, and they can earn points for losing weight or walking during the month. And basically, they get each point's worth $5. So it's actual real money. You can turn this into Amazon gift cards, Bass Pro, you name it. And we've had some drivers, there's been a couple they've done on Dashboard Radio and some other things that have really turned their life around. And at that point, it's kind of a decision, right? Like you have to make that decision, but having those incentives available and the education available to do those things, once a guy flips that switch of, wow, I want to live past 61, or I want to live a longer, healthier, now those tools are in place to help them do that.
And part of that, you nailed it, is I would say the community aspect too. Anything we can do to get drivers involved with each other and their office counterparts is huge. And so like through the Fitbit app, we'll do company-wide competitions, and you'll have teams. So you've got individual points on the line that you can get, but you've also got this company-wide competition where if your team wins, you get more points. And it's drivers' wives, it's office shop, wives of office and shop personnel. So you've got this whole mixture. So you're not only working together to be healthy, but you're engaging. You can send messages. People will set up text groups where they communicate. I think just all that, bringing drivers in as much as possible too. Just even on like the mental health side of things. Like I've never worked in a job where I was completely alone from everyone else for days on it. I mean, obviously I know they have interactions on the road, but totally different than what we're used to, especially at a place like Nussbaum with a good culture where you're surrounded by people you want to be around. So as much as we can do to involve them in that, I think just helps promote overall healthy choices.
Excellent response. What's the best way for those in the audience to contact you and learn more about Truck Drivers Best? You referenced the website earlier, showing that on the screen now, truckdriversbest.com. How can they get in touch with you directly?
So I would say, well, both of us are on LinkedIn, so that's an easy way. And then we set up an email address, a business email address, and that's just Caleb G, so CALEBG @truckdriversbest.com. So a couple of different ways there.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much. You're both class acts. I always enjoy spending time with you, and look forward to seeing Truck Drivers Best grow and help a lot of CDL drivers out there.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for having us, Jeremy.
Appreciate that. Enjoyed it.
Thank you for taking the iRoad with me. Once again, special thanks to the sponsors of the show. We really appreciate you. If you're interested in being a sponsor or joining me for an interview, please email Jeremy at takingthehighroad.com. Until next time, thank you for taking the higher road.